you all could join us. Welcome to September, our operations webinar. This month we're going to talk about everyone's favorite subject, the thing we always seem to be stuck on in the Park Service, especially in facility management, and that is projects. We have a couple of guest speakers for us today. You see Corey Ducine there. He says NERO. He works for Northeast Region, whatever number that is. I don't know the numbers. Corey is a graduate of FMLP, is also the one of the rec fee people at Northeast Region, so he's going to talk to us a little bit. And then just below him, at least on my screen, is Carrie Shandor. Known Carrie a while now. I think even since she started working, since she was working at Death Valley, which is behind her right now, but now she is working for WASO in the budget area, dealing a lot with PMIS. So she's been in facilities before, so she's also a graduate of FMLP. We'll introduce them a little bit more a little bit later. So welcome, Corey and Carrie. I'm glad to have you again with us. So like I said, this month we are talking projects. So quite a few objectives here that we're going to go through. First of all, I want to describe the role of projects and what they play in MPS facility management. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between OMPS money and projects. OMPS is what we dealt with last month. This month we're dealing with projects. We're going to talk a little bit about the process flow for projects, including the timeline. It was an eye-opener for me the first time that I saw it, to see all the steps a project goes through before you're ever given the go-ahead to do the work. Explain the need for good project planning, especially now as we are in a brave new world of projects, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then talk a little bit about some of the tools. Carrie does a great job of showing you how to pull reports out of PMIS, especially now that Carrie and the PMIS team have done a great job of getting business intelligence into PMIS reporting. So we have a lot more power behind us when it comes to PMIS reports. So we'll look at some of that as we go forward. So that's where we're headed. But before we do, I always like to start off with a little bit of a homework review, looking at those wonderful spreadsheets that I know you all loved so much last month on operations. You actually did a pretty good job, and thanks for all the effort. But there's a few things that I noticed when I was reviewing them. And first off, Philip Clark, thank you for this quote. I think I'm going to use it from here on out in FMLP, that O&M is a losing battle. Most of you in some way or another addressed that. It's almost deflating to look at your budget and what you need to accomplish with that little bit of money that you have. So a lot of these other comments that I saw there are directly related to that. Things like it's difficult to balance the budget. Why are all the priorities scattered all over the place with FMD, MRM, even optimizer bands, things like that. So yes, it's a difficult thing. But what we want to emphasize is that through all this planning, that it's try to make the best use of what little resource you have when it comes to OMPS money. A couple of you mentioned using the volunteers or partners as supplemental funding. We didn't address that. When we get towards AFMP, we will start talking about that, using volunteer or partners as supplemental funding. And when you and your team get together to put together this final OMPS, O&M budget sheet, then y'all can definitely include some of that in your plan. But yes, that's a great way to supplement some of that budget money you have. I know I use volunteers for grounds care at the park here. We had a partner that provided money to do all of the landscaping around landscape maintenance around the visitor center every month. So, you know, those are great ways to supplement some of that money and make up for some of that lack of resources that you have. A couple of other things that y'all notice, data accuracy is extremely important. We will go over that again. And everything we do these days, data accuracy is important. When you're putting together a project, it's important to have good data accuracy. I think Corey and Carrie might even allude to that a little bit. I skipped over one, using the sheet to communicate to the rest of the management. A couple of you brought that up. So one of the great things about the optimizer, even though you know, optimizer bands now are probably going to be pulled out of project scoring, it's still a good way to use the optimizer at the park level to communicate with your management team that, yes, this is our requirements for operations and maintenance for each particular asset. And then this is how we're planning to address that. So it's a great communication tool, trying to get everybody on your management team on board. And then a few of you mentioned actually, the optimizer bands don't seem to be consistent with the API. That's okay. As we talked about, API is basically your mission-oriented priority. So, you know, you go through those questions, ask about resource management, ask about visitor use, all that stuff related to the mission of the Park Service and the park. So that's going to set your API score. Whereas the optimizer band, while we may use that as a base for determining the API is a base for determining the optimizer band, it's still, you're allowed to move it so it can meet your actual operational needs. So if something comes in as maybe an optimizer band 3 based on the API and FCI, but you cannot, your operations require you to move it up to 2 or 1, you definitely have that ability to do that. So that's why those optimizer bands don't seem to be consistent all the time. Just highlight a couple of the questions of what y'all came up with. A lot of you noticed the lack of work order actuals. That's a data accuracy thing. Where did the planned funding totals come from? So that was, we had a lot of discussion about that. So what the planned funding totals are is you take that requirement. So that requirement is what the standard is for each location for operations and maintenance. Then you put those percentages in, and those percentages are what you and the management team decide on, or this is what we're going to do, percentage of optimizer requirement for optimizer band 1. And you know, you keep going down there, you put those percentages in, and then it multiplies the requirements times those percentages, and that becomes your plan. So that's where the planned funding totals come. It is really the parks plan, so they are the ones that are set those percentages and come up with those planned funding totals. Hope that clears it up a little bit. How often do we update our data? So that's a sort of a loaded question. From time to time, there have been service-wide efforts to update optimizers, and so that may happen. I think the last time was almost 7 years ago now. So when we get through revamp, and you know, who knows, we may do another one soon, but we got a lot of other stuff on our plate right now. But again, most of the optimizer is going to come back to the parks level for your use. So what I would keep a separate one away from the official optimizer. That's mostly that spreadsheet that you saw, and would update it as needed for help with our planning at the park. So for you, you can do it as often as you want. The official change won't happen until there's a service-wide push or a region-wide push. So a lot of the other things, you know, they're just because there's like, again, the deflating aspect of seeing what you're required to do with a little bit of money that you have. There's a couple of questions about the 20% for indirect. That seemed a little bit high to some of you. And to be honest, the first time I was told 20%, I thought it was a little bit high, but then when I started trying to put actual numbers to it, I realized it's probably a good number, or maybe even a little bit low. And that 20% includes things like not just your admin time, so not just the time you spend in the shop doing your admin type stuff, but that's also all your leave, and that's also all of training time, any time that you're not actually out there working. So 20%, especially for a permanent employee, is probably good, if not a little bit low. You might adjust it for seasonal employees since they don't take as much leave generally. So that might be adjusted, and they don't go as much training. So sometimes you say, yeah, okay, we'll give our seasonal employees a little bit more direct time and a little less indirect. And then, like I said, most of the rest of the questions were based on some of the stuff you saw. They were great. One thing that you'll want to do with that information now is, as you start meeting with the park management team, you may want to ask some of those questions. Why are these things done this way? That's what we call ground truthing. And as you start getting into a position at a park, you need to ground truth some of those questions that you have. So anyway, like I said, great job with your homework. I'm not going to get too much more because we got a lot to cover today. So any questions about homework or anything like that before we move into this month? All right. Hearing none. So welcome to the brave new world of NPS projects. So just a little bit of background here. This is my 7th time to do this webinar. It is this month. It's going to be nothing like the other 6 times because everything is changing for us right now, and in the midst of change. And I don't have all the information yet, as some of our coworkers in PFMD are actually meeting right now to discuss some of this stuff. So we're hoping to get everything put in place quickly so we can have it for the next SCC. But with everything that's going on outside of the COVID pandemic, it really is a brave new world of NPS projects. The 2 big things are, first of all, the coming conclusion of revamp. Revamp looked at how we dealt with projects and how we're going to score projects, things like that. So there's going to be a lot of new guidance come out soon, within like the next couple of weeks, on how all that will work. So that was the first thing. And then of course the second thing we all know is the Great American Outdoors Act. And with GOA and that large influx of money, it's going to affect everybody going forward with projects. So the way it stands right now, the GOA list, the GOA project list, is being formulated at WASO and even at the department level. So there will not be, for all intents and purposes, an SCC for GOA. Your park will be told whether you have a GOA project or not. So looking at who's on, I know a few of you already you're probably going to get that notification soon. So that's how GOA money is being handled. The way it will affect the rest of us, and even those of you at parks that are going to get GOA money, is that those GOA projects are being pulled out of other fund sources, such as line item construction, a lot of rec fee. Corey and I have been talking about it over the last week or so. Some repair rehab, I think, is in there. Other areas. So those big projects are now going to be pulled out of those fund sources to go to GOA, meaning there's going to be sort of a vacuum. There's going to be a lot of money available in the other fund sources for the rest of the parks, and even the parks that get GOA money, to tap into. So like I said, in the past, we used to teach you, okay, make sure you have a good plan, make sure you're tapping all your fund sources. Right now, we don't know what that's going to look like. So when Christy and I started talking about this, Christy came up with this, is let the fund find you. And you can put the D on the end of fun if you want to. But when I started doing projects almost 15 years ago now, I guess, you know, I was told, do not write your project for a specific fund source in mind. You write your project, then look at the eligibility. Then when you do your components, that's when you identify a fund source. That is more true now than ever. You still want to write your project very good. Make sure that you are not identifying especially one fund source. You'll get to that when you do the component and you do identify the fund source to go towards. But realize that with all of the vacuum of money coming out for GOA, there may be another fund source that contacts you and say, hey, can you make this adjustment to this project? And let's take it from repair rehab, and put it into rec fee. So don't be surprised if you get a call from someone like Corey in your region saying, hey, I need to fill this money. I need to spend this money. Can we take this repair rehab and put it to rec fee? So that's what looks like is coming forward. So like I said, it's a brave new world. Not everything is set in stone yet. Hopefully, I think we're going to be getting it set in stone by the end of this month, so we can start the new fiscal year with all the new stuff. Yeah, I mean, we just met with our boss, Sandy and I just met with our boss, and they said, get ready. One of the first big pushes, get ready for this, will be how to turn PSAs into projects. So we may start October talking about how to turn PSAs into projects and training. So anyway, any questions about that? Everyone bewildered about that. All right. So let's back up a little bit, talk about project funding in the MPS. We used to have a facilities planning branch in PFMD. It's now been brought up to PPFL level. There's now a facilities planning division. But this is sort of their definition of project funding in the MPS. So just take a minute, read that. Let me, and then I'll open it up to you. Go ahead and after you read through it, tell me what stands out to you as important here in this sort of definition of how we deal with project funding in MPS. Any ideas? So do I need to pull a Steve Wolter and call on somebody?
Still trying to read it.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot of words. All right. Chad, thanks for that. I usually bring that one out right away because there is no single fund source to fulfill the life cycle requirements of MPS facilities. I think that's probably the most important sentence in that whole thing. If we were in private industry, we would not be dealing with projects the way we are. So if we were to identify something that needed to be done, we would either take the money out of our profits in order to do the project, or if we were like in a nonprofit, we would do a fundraising or something. But to go off all these different project funding sources, are really the odd way of doing things. And in some ways, it's not the best way to do it because, again, we're having to constantly figure that out, figure out which fund source is the best. So someone else, I think, circled something else down towards the bottom. Who was that? It's gone off my screen now. Anyone want to take credit for that?
Hey, sorry, I was looking for the mute button. That was me.
All right, Aaron, thanks. Yeah, so I think you were circling right amount, right place, right time. Is that correct? So that's I think another, yeah, thanks, Aaron. I think that's another important thing there is because we have all of these multiple funds to go across, it becomes behooving upon us as facility managers to make sure that we have a good plan in place to make sure that the funding is there at the right amount, at the right place, at the right time. And it's hard to do. Again, going back to my days at the park, I had, I knew that looking at a life cycle of our air handling units at the visitor center, I knew that generally they lasted this many years. A few years out from the time that they generally would fail or need to be replaced, I put in a project to get that done. The project got funded, and the problem is that we still maybe had another year or two left in those air handlers. So we had to make that decision. It's a constant balancing act to make sure that we get those funds at the right place at the right time. So that's why project planning becomes so important within the Park Service, because we have to go to these multiple fund sources to meet our life cycle requirements. We always are trying to balance to make sure that the funds get there at the right time, right place. So that makes sense. Anything else y'all notice in that? All right. So with that, I'm going to put up this scene here. So I always think this may be like going Sun Road or Trail Ridge Road or something like that, one of those big scenic drives we have in the park. But this right here tells you how we might maintain this scene using those multiple fund sources. So like you can say right here, doing the road work, maybe, doing our pavement preservation. We'll get federal highways to do that. Maybe some of that guardrail maintenance, culvert damage, drainage, also doing the same thing. Down here at the Vista to construct it, or maybe to do major modifications to it. We may have to go to line item construction to do that big parking job, that Vista reconstruction job. I'm sorry, a little tongue time. Clearing the way for the Vista, you might use cyclic to clear out to make sure the Vista stays open for us. I always think it's interesting that they identify cyclic maintenance for mowing and brushing alongside the road. So, that might be a way to handle that too. Using rec fee for this multi-use trail right here. So that's some ways that you might be able to handle operating and maintain, or actually doing the life cycle requirements of this particular scene. So think about that. There's not always one way to do it though. So what other fund sources might we tap in to do some of these particular tasks that need to get accomplished? So anybody?
How about your just your operations budget?
Right. Thanks, Butch. You're right. And like I said, this mowing, brushing one, going to cyclic maintenance for that may be a little bit of a stretch. I mean, I've always used operations money for that, especially the mowing portion of it. There was a while I would use cyclic maintenance to maybe do major tree work on a cycle. But for the mainly your standard mowing and brushing, you would probably use O&M money to do that. So great one. Any other ideas? Let me ask this. So we have a rec fee here for this multi-use connector trail. Could you think of another fund source to go after to maybe construct
How about
that?
like a partner or something?
Right. Or multimodal transportation. Yeah, I've Teton, I think, used a lot of partnership money to put in some of their multi-use trails. So that, yeah, you're right. Transportation systems, I've seen parks where they've used concessionaires to run their transportation system, include that part of the concession contract. I don't know how y'all do it at Zion, Chad, but that way, okay. Yeah, anything else you see that, how else could we maybe accomplish some of the same work using different money? Any ideas? Well, I mean, the point is that, again, we have multiple fund sources that we have to tap into. Not one of them is going to accomplish everything we need to do, and sometimes there may be multiple fund sources to go to. And again, the planning part of it comes in to make sure that we have the right amount of money come in at the right place at the right time. So think about that as going forward with project planning. So this, oops, went too far. This next slide here, like I said, this one was sort of eye-opening to me. We had a different one, but Carrie actually provided with us this last week. So you're seeing this for the first time. But the process to get a PMIS project complete, and it's a long one. It takes at least usually 3 years, unless you're going over emergency funding. But normally we think, okay, all we need to do is put the project in the PMIS, make sure it looks good, make sure it's well written, everything like that. And then hope we'll see the money at the other end. But that's it. Once you hit that submit button, so this top line here is really the park's initial efforts. So, create the project, review the plan, approve it, select the eligible funding sources, look for the additional criteria, prioritize your project, and then submit. And that's when most of us sort of lose track of it for a while, or it goes away, we think. But really after that, it gets involved in the whole budgeting project. So it goes to region, they approve the components. If it requires WASO review, then it will go down and get WASO review. Either way, it will get formulated either by the region or by WASO. All of this gets packaged together, gets, part of the green book, gets sent to Congress, Congress approves, comes back all the way through OMB. Sandy has a whole session about this at AFMP, so we're not going to get into too much detail. But when it does get back, does WASO fund it? So then WASO has to create the WBS. If not, region will create it. PMIS gets updated with the WBS, the funding advice gets issued. You can see all this stuff until finally it gets back to the point where PMIS updates all the work orders, the WBSs, everything is released for use in QuickTime, and you get the go-ahead basically to execute the project and start doing the work. After the work is done, of course, you got to do the completion status. So it's sort of conclude all of this, but all these steps and additional ones that are going on behind the scene just to get you from the time you identify the project need to actually executing the project need takes years. So that's again why it's important to make sure that we have a good plan in place, because we need to sort of forecast out a few years what our needs are going to be and start working on the project right now. So everyone that has to have their say in that project work will have their say. It's a long, complicated process, but it's one we have to deal with. So any questions or comments about that? All right. So one more thing before I turn it over to Carrie and to Corey. Cody, I have Cody on my mind. Corey, a couple of terms that seem to be confusing for folks that we use quite a bit, and that's the difference between formulated and funded. So when a project is formulated, it means Region has assigned it to a specific year and a fund source. And so that means the plan is there to fund it. Doesn't mean you have the funds yet. It means things could change and you know, that funding could be withdrawn. But once you get it formulated, that means there is a year on the calendar and the fund source in place. So you can start planning on how you're going to get that work done. I mean, so formulated is the first step in all this. It means the project has made it through all the initial review and stuff, and it's given that planned funding source in year. Funded, on the other hand, means the money is there. The money is there for the project. You can go out and do the work. Normally you would have a WBS and you can go out and do the work. So funding is, you definitely have the money in hand. Formulated, the way I always look at it is you can plan on getting that money in hand. So any questions about that real quick? I just want to make sure we cleared that up. Okay, well with that, I'm going to stop talking a little bit. Turn this over to Carrie. Like I said, Carrie is an FMLP grad. I think we decided it was FMLP 5.
Yep.
Yep. So that was back when she was still in facilities. Were you at Death Valley at the time?
I was.
Okay. So Carrie was there. She has since moved in. She worked a little bit for PFMD, and now she is at Budget, where she deals primarily with PMIS. Carrie is the one person to go to if you have any PMIS questions, I think. And done a great job of making sure that we can use PMIS to the best of our abilities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie. I'll let you share your screen, Carrie.
Okay.
And she's going to talk to us a little bit about PMIS and especially about how to get reports and stuff out.
Yes, thanks, Mark. So I am pretty much just going to show you reports in PMIS. I think you have other class activities that get you into PMIS. We, of course, have plenty of resources available that will help you get through your projects and e-courses and whatnot. So, but we're going to talk about reports today. So in that last slide was actually a really good plan. You know, the report I'm going to primarily show you today is actually a really good report that you can use to monitor, get a plan. You can even create a 5-year plan out of it. You know what's coming in the future because it's formulated, and then you know what you're allowed to execute on because it's funded. You know what's still draft that you need to work on and so forth with this particular report. But the reports, as Mark mentioned, we've made significant changes in the last couple of years. They're much more robust now. Have a lot more capability than we ever had in the past. So we're pretty excited about our reports. But if you have access to PMIS, any user who has a profile has access to the reports. So you would either select the report menu up in this upper right navigation area or in the left navigation menu. And once that comes up, then pretty much the only thing you want to pay attention to, and disregard that my screen looks a little different than what you guys would see since I work with the help desk. But this very first top report is really the only report you want to work with at this point. PMIS reports on Be a Publisher. You click that radio button, it's going to open up a new tab of your browser called Oracle BI. And this is our reporting platform. This is where you're going to find all the reports available in PMIS. So when you first get in, this is the home page. This is going to show you, if you have recently run reports in there, it's going to show you a thumbnail, and you can open those reports again. You can create favorites if you want to at the bottom, because as you run reports, something that might be a favorite might disappear off this front screen. We have a catalog, so if you can go to the catalog folder from this Browse Manage pane on the left, or you can just click catalog up here in the top menu. Again, I apologize, you guys are seeing some views because we've been testing that normally you wouldn't see. When you get into this catalog, you want to make sure you're on shared folders. From the shared folders, I'm going to highlight this index of PMIS reports. If you're not familiar with all the reports that PMIS has, if you click on this index of PMIS reports, we will give you a description of every single report we have, along with what the filters are available. We call it parameters, but those filters that are going to be available to allow you to narrow down your reports, and also what your output is. Kind of want to look at that top one, because that's one that WASO runs to put in the green book. But you'd have, this is going to be all the fields that would come available in that report. And then the formats that are available, though we know most everybody's going to work in Excel when we work with these reports. So this is actually a really great report. It's a report, it's not really a report, but you can run reports directly from it. So I personally have it as a favorite so that I don't have to navigate all the way through the catalog. I just come straight to the index and I can go run what I want to run. So I wanted to highlight that because that's a good initial place to go when you don't know what reports to run. Let me get back to the catalog. If you don't launch a report from the catalog, you click on this reports folder, and it should be much more simpler for you guys. I see there's more folders available in my view. Then you see the reports that are available. Let me scroll back past those that aren't available for you. And then all the reports that are in alphabetical order going down the list. So if you know what report you want to run, you just go down and you find the report you want to run. Now, before I run the real report that I'm going to show you guys, I want to highlight this project and component data spreadsheet. Every other report in our report menu is a canned report, which means you cannot manipulate the output. All you can do is create some filters to get the data that you want to see, but you cannot manipulate what you're going to get back. The project and component data spreadsheet is the only customizable report that PMIS has. And I'm going to open up the parameter screen to kind of illustrate this. But you have the ability to input filters, and there are a ton of filters here. Pretty much every field you could filter on. And then I'm going to highlight keyword search. So if somebody asks you to run a report for every project that has the word vegetation in it, then this will search every narrative field within PMIS for the word vegetation and give you a report. So this report is extremely robust and extremely can get you what you need. In the output, which is on the right side, every available data field in PMIS is available as an output option in this report, so you can pick what report output you want to receive, with the caveat that you can only go up to 50 at a time. So if you want every single field in PMIS, you're going to have to run a couple different reports because we have more than 50 fields. But most people really only want 50, key fields. They don't hit the 50 field mark. So you can put anything you want in here. Everything is grouped in categories. You can look for review statuses, so forth. So just whatever you want, and it goes all the way down. And for you guys, we have all the FMSS stuff at either the project level or the component level, whichever you want to see, with all your work orders, your work types, your costs from the work orders, your optimizer band from the work orders, whatever you want is sitting here. And then the Pepsi information as well, if you need to have the compliance. There's some future enhancement with that. It's pretty bare bones right now. But maybe mid-year, this upcoming fiscal year, we'll make that more robust with some changes we're making where we're going to have a lot more compliance data. So I just want to highlight that report. We're not going to run it, but that is a really good report if you need to customize the output away from the canned reports. But I do want to run the project review status report because that's a good one that you can use to create a basic 5-year plan or have an idea of what's coming. Does anybody want me to run their particular park? If not, I'm going to run Death Valley because that's my go-to. But
yeah, if you could run like a Zion Trails report, that would help me in my developmental activity.
Sure. Well, I can't probably pin it down to trails, but I can definitely run Zion. So I have 6 filters available here under this report. I can pick my region. I can pick a alpha code. So let's pick Zion. Let me uncheck the all and go down all the way to the bottom. Zion, and every park is listed there. And then if you needed to, because this list is really long, you can also go to the search, and I could have looked for Zion and then just moved it over with these move buttons or remove buttons. Then let's say I'm going to pull a 5-year plan for you. So we're going to pull 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 with the requested funding fiscal year. I'm just going to leave it at that. We're going to pull everything based on just 5 years and the park. Hit OK, and it's going to run. Now, in the past, if you tried to run too big of a report, you would crash our system. Now we don't have that problem. It'll come back relatively quickly. Within Oracle BI, you can actually manipulate the data without even exporting to Excel. Now, that's not how it will, when it exports, it will send you everything, but you can kind of do a bare look here. So like I could go look for all my draft projects or park draft projects at Zion, for example. So these are ones that you have, and you know, when you're looking at 2021 next year and they're still in draft status, that's something to pay attention to. But you can also say, take a look at the ones that are region and WASA reviewed. You can look at, you know, where it is with the review status, what's the requested funding fiscal year, and then you can also see as this ties in with the slide that Mark showed, formulated, funded, or eligible in this column here. You can know that it's eligible, which means it hasn't been picked up in a plan for a fund source. That means it's not formulated. If it's formulated but not funded, meaning it's maybe on a plan. So you see like this one is formulated for 2021, so you should be able to expect that one next year. 2024 formulated. We pick up some old ones because the requested funding fiscal year was 2022, but it got funded early. So you can kind of pull those things out. You see other things all the way into 2024 formulated. We shouldn't see really anything that's funded too much. We have a couple that are funded that look like they got picked up early with the fund sources, but because we were looking for future years, hopefully we're not seeing a whole lot of funded yet. But if you pull in 2020, you should see a lot of funded as well. And then you see your funding source. So there's a lot of details here that just give you a good idea of, you know, where things are at. We have other reports that'll give you your budget status and all that kind of stuff that PMIS receives. So this is a good report, a good base report to start with if you're new to PMIS reporting. Now, so you can look at this data. Like I said, you can filter right here in the screen. You know, if I wanted to look for 2022 for formulated or 2021, then I should know what's coming up in my next fiscal year because it's on the formulation plan. So as long as, you know, funding comes the way everybody's expecting it to, hopefully these are the projects I'm going to have. I can look at this a year in advance, look at 2022 now, understand what compliance I might need to make sure it gets done ahead of that, so forth. So this is just a good base report. Now we can export this report to our computers using this little gear icon. It's called the actions icon. We can export to Excel, and you would just follow your on-screen prompts, and that'll send it to Excel. We have another feature which we absolutely love called schedule. So if I don't want to log into PMIS on a regular basis, but I want to get this data on a schedule, I can set it up to send to my email, and I'll get it whenever I set up, however I set it up with the schedule. So I'm going to show you this because it's pretty cool. You can also send it to somebody who's not a PMIS user. So for example, if your chief of maintenance is not a PMIS user, you can generate this report and have it sent to his email on whatever schedule you want so that he can keep on top of what's coming. So when I first schedule, it's already going to show me the filters that I had entered. So you may need to update this occasionally, and there's a way to do that. If you go to the output, you do need to tell it that you want Excel. Then you can add a destination, and this is where you can add in whoever you want. You could add yourself so that you don't have to log in PMIS and run the report yourself. You can put multiple people, just put a comma in between their email addresses. However many you want, you can CC people, whatever you want to do. Then you pick your schedule. You can run it hourly if you're crazy. You can run it daily or weekly, monthly, or even annually. So like a good report you could run annually is the status completion report status, so that you can pull in those reports that might need to have their status completion reports done. You could have that sent to whoever does that come, August, as a little tickler. Hey, it's time to do our status completion report. But you can pick any dates. You can pick specific dates. If you say monthly, you can tell it, I want to run it every month, or I want to run it every third month. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility here with the schedule. I'm going to run it once because I don't want to receive this over and over again. I can also have notification if I want to make sure that I get notified that it failed or it got skipped for some reason, or that it even completed and then my chief just got the report. I can do that by putting in my email address and notifying. And then we just hit submit. And then we put in our report job name, hit OK, and then it's going to submit. And then within a matter of seconds, I should receive an email. There's the email, and there's my output. So it has my message, comes from the help desk, and there's my output that I just got in Excel. I'm not going to download it, but. And then I can do everything in Excel. Now, again, it doesn't have those things that we made or that we did to manipulate the view live. It is going to have everything. So you'll then, do your filters and have that data. So the scheduling is actually a really great option. So you don't have to come into PMIS. It is just going to run, show up in your email inbox or whoever's email inbox that you want it to go to. And there you go. It's a good way to monitor and track your progress. So with that, are there any questions about anything I've shown you? Because that's a pretty quick and dirty. But Mark only gives me 10 minutes, so.
And you usually take more than that.
I do usually take more than that. I'm trying really hard, though.
I do have a question, Carrie. So can you schedule a report with the raw data instead of the
Yes.
Okay.
You just need to be on that tab. So when you're in the scheduler, the raw data, sometimes it's going to be blank. So you do need to refresh because we only populate one tab at a time. But I think there might not be any filters. But once you're on the raw data tab, when you're in the schedule setup, there's a way to tell it. So here, when I was on this, I could have switched to the raw data tab as opposed to that review status tab. When you see a raw data tab, it means on the other tab, we have grouping. So we'll kind of group things up at, say, like the project level, and then, those will be merged rows, and then the components will split out. But if you have multiple fund sources, those could be grouped and split out. So there's a lot of merged cells can make it difficult with Excel. So right here, though, you can switch it over to the raw data. It'll have the same filters that you had and create your schedule based on that.
Yeah, I was going to bring that. I forgot to bring it up last week. The raw data usually is a little bit easier when you're exporting to Excel because you don't have those merged cells.
Yeah, the other tab is just prettier to look at.
Yeah.
Any other questions about PMIS or the reports? All right, well, hopefully that helps you guys. And we have plenty of resources available on our SharePoint site, and we're always here to help. We're very responsive help desk, so between myself and my coworkers.
And Carrie did provide us some of those resources, that graphic that I showed you earlier. So I think we got them up on the virtual classroom. If not, they will be soon. So you have access to that. And like Carrie said, there's a lot of great help stuff out there now for PMIS. So definitely bookmark the SharePoint site. All right. Thanks, Carrie. So with that, I'm not going to share my screen again. But next, we want to turn it over to Corey Ducine. Corey was FMLP class 10?
Yes, 10.
All right. And he was at Glacier Bay at the time. Cool thing is that my wife and I actually went on a cruise through Glacier Bay at the time. So I think it was the only time you actually got to do the transfer to a ship, Corey. And Corey came aboard our ship and spent the day with us in Glacier Bay, which was fun.
Yeah, it was actually one of my developmental activities.
Right. He included as a development activity as for his FMLP. So since then, he has now moved to the Northeast region, where he does the funding size of rec fee, right?
The expenditure side, yeah.
Expenditure size, yes. So he is very active and knowledgeable in all things rec fee. So I'm going to turn it over to Corey. He's going to talk a little bit about the rec fee program and how to make sure that your project is well written so that you can get funded through rec fee. So, Corey,
excellent. Thanks, Mark.
You should be able to share.
Okay, let me get my screen pulled up here. 1 second. All right. So a quick introduction. My name is Corey Ducine. I am the official title is Expenditure Fee Analyst within Tier Region 1, formerly known as the Northeast Region. I am based out of the Northeast region, but I'm actually duty stationed in Northeast Utah. My wife and I are dual career, so I am sitting out in the Intermountain region area instead of out on the East Coast. I am part of the FMLP class 10. I'm also one of the National Trainer Development Program collateral duty instructors for FMSS. So I have quite a background in everything that you all are learning and then your operations portion of FMLP. As far as my job with Rec Fee, I am considered for our team a subject matter expert in everything on the expenditure side. So AFS, PMIS, FMSS, project writing. As Mark said, I do a lot of things on the national level. A lot of times I sit in and help do reviews for national projects that go before Congress. I'm also involved right now with rewriting and designing the 5-year Rec Fee comprehensive planning tools, as well as the new reporting platforms. We're going to be migrating over into Power BI instead of kind of more static reports. We'll have things that are live. So fairly involved on the national level, not just in the Northeast region. So I see actually quite a few of you on the call. I've actually looked at all of your revenue projects and even some of your 20%. So I recognize a lot of the parks that you all are sitting at right now. Today, I just want to kind of go over some of the key elements of a Rec Fee project and how to successfully navigate that giant flow chart that Mark shared with us to hopefully get your project funded. Feel free to take notes. However, I am providing my slides to the instructor team that they can make it all available to you. So that way you don't have to try and furiously write down everything that's on my slides. And at the end, we'll just have a little moment that any of you can ask any questions. With that, let's go ahead and get started. To start out with, let's just go over a brief overview of the whole program. All Rec Fee projects must be consistent with the February 2016 Recreation Fee Expenditure Policy and the current SEC guidance. It is critical to refer to both these documents when preparing any FLRIA project requests. And I say more specifically looking at the current SEC guidance. Typically, the SEC guidance changes every year. The FLRIA fund source is non-appropriated funds, so we have to be approved as a fund source by Congress every year. So a lot of times based on someone's priority in the current administration or director's office, a lot of things tend to get shuffled around, changed. So if you wrote a project 3 years ago, that might not be eligible this upcoming SEC, so make sure to check those documents every year. Also, funds must be expended on activities that have a direct visitor connection, are driven by visitor need, and serve a substantial number of visitors. These are key things that need to be written into your actual project. Don't try and bury it in a fancy narrative. Even if you have to blatantly say the direct visitor connection is, we'd rather see that at the beginning, then we can work with you on modifying the narratives, but to try and tease it out of what you've written in a 1,000-word narrative is very difficult and time consuming on both our side, and also tends to fall to the wayside of getting actually reviewed. So it goes back to kind of what Mark was saying earlier, have a good, well-written project at the core, and then that's when we can start teasing in the specifics for each fund source. Projects must have a clear beginning and end and provide a unique product, service, or result. A quantified, defined outcome or deliverable for park visitors. Again, that kind of goes back to just the core of good project writing. All projects, doesn't really matter what fund source, should have that bullet point highlighted in it. This is something that's unique to the facility projects. Anything that's over total project cost of $500,000 or more are required to address the deferred maintenance and capital improvement guidance, or the DMCI, which was formerly known as Attachment G. There's still some guidance documents out there that say Attachment G. This is one of those additional fields that pop up once the project cost goes over $500,000, and it's an additional field that you have to go seek out in the edit project field, but these have to be filled out correctly. And the reason why I say that is this information you enter into those 3 fields are what go into the Green Book directly. That first report Carrie was showing us is the report that we use to fill out the Green Book entries, and it comes directly from what you enter in the DMCI fields. Last on this slide, all projects must comply with one or more of the 4 priorities outlined in the Rec Fee Expenditure Policy and SCC guidelines or guidance documents. And with that, we're just going to hop right over to the next slide, which is briefly going to touch on what those 4 priorities are. These are priorities that are written into the policy. They're written in also in the SCC guidance. Pretty straightforward. The one thing that's a little bit different now is how priority 1 and the sequential priorities are sorted. So priority 1 focus right now is repair, maintenance, and facility enhancement related directly to visitor enjoyment, visitor access, and visitor health and safety. So the one thing why this is highlighted in bold is this priority, we have to focus 55% of each of our funds from the 4 fund sources that we have. So we have nationwide, regional 20%, PLC 20%, and revenue. So each of those fund sources have to have 55% deferred maintenance work identified for each year before we can focus on funding or even formulating projects for the other priorities. So it's right now that's what the current policy says. Again, this might change, and when we see these GOA funds come down, we might not be focused on deferred maintenance as much, but it's still something that we can't even entertain the idea on some fund sources of focusing on priority 2 till we get that goal met. Priority 2 is visitor interpretation, visitor information, visitor services, or visitor needs assessments and signs. Signs can kind of float between priority 1 and priority 2 depending on how they're written. Going back to that slide Mark had where it was the cross section of the road. A lot of times signs can fall under large groupings and could be in FMSS, such as the park's main entrance sign, or they can be signs such as around a visitor center to help with visitors navigating through where restrooms are, things like that. So it depends on how they are. And if there's any kind of questions, best thing to do would be to get with your FMSS specialist to make sure that you're writing the project correctly, whether it's facilities or a non-facility project. Priority 3, this one's a little bit more of a fine-tuned priority. It's habitat restoration projects directly related to wildlife-dependent recreation. And it's only limited to hunting, fishing, wildlife observation, or photography. And it has to be specifically written towards a specific category. So for example, if you're working on habitat restoration for this endangered bird in your park, your project has to be written very specifically for that and only that item. So a little bit harder to write towards that priority, but if you do end up going to that, write the project really well at the core, and then your regional folks will help you to fine tune this project to make it eligible for the fund source. And then last but not least is priority 4, any type of law enforcement related work that's public use or recreation. The one that we see most here is any of the larger revenue collecting parks. So a lot of times you see dispatch operations, law enforcement hiring for special events. There's some of the parks in the Northeast region that have ambulance crews that are hired on. A lot of times it's renting for a season an additional ambulance, things like that. So that's what priority 4 tends to land. Next slide. There are some limitations on using recreation fees, and that applies kind of the whole program FLURIA-wide. Luckily, in the last couple of years, this list has been kind of drawn down to 3. We used to have about 8 different things that you could not spend FLURIA funds on. And right now it's biological monitoring of endangered species. That's written actually in FLURIA law. The next one is employee bonuses and awards. So one thing, especially this time of year, one of my big tasks is to get into FBMS and run a FLURIA-wide for Northeast region report and filter on the BOC code for awards and bonuses, and then start calling up parks and saying you need to move those funds. So that's something to pay attention to, especially with seasonal employees. So it's easier on us and easier on you all this time of year instead of the last couple of weeks of the fiscal year. Just make sure not to have anything hit in a FLURIA account. And then the last one's kind of a gray area. It says general employee housing. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't pay for employee housing for an employee or to do work on employee housing. It's just right now it's not allowed. You'd have to go and get approval from the associate director of business services at the WASO level to do any of that type of gray area work. We've seen some parks being able to do this, but you have to kind of make your case and have all your ducks in a row. Next slide. Let's go ahead and just jump right into some eligibility per fund source. So the first one, kind of the easiest one to look at, is the park revenue. So this is any park that retains revenue that they collect. And specifically, this is defined as only parks that are authorized through the Federal Lands Recreation Enhancement Act, or FLURIA, to charge and collect recreation fees on federal recreational lands and waters are eligible for this fund source. So if you're a park that doesn't collect any kind of revenue, whether that be expanded amenities such as parking fees in a parking lot, or recreational use such as boat ramps, or just the plain entrance fee at a booth, and you select this as an eligible fund source, you're never going to be able to compete in this. The only time that sometimes you'll be able to get money from this is if the region has contingency funds that we need to use. Sometimes we'll reach out to parks that we know can execute projects really well, and they have shovel-ready projects that are well written. Sometimes we'll pull one of your projects in and fund it out of this fund source. But as the SDC goes, you're not eligible for this. Again, going back to what I said earlier, all projects under this fund source must be consistent with the February 2016 recreation fee expenditure policy and current SCC guidance. Then on to the regional 20%. So with this, all parks except fee collecting parks that gross more than $500,000 annually are eligible to compete for regional 20% funds. This is a normal process through the SEC where projects are submitted and competed, reviewed, ranked. Usually for us, we do a panel. So it's a panel of your peers. We select usually a couple superintendents, facility managers, things like that, and they go through and rank all the projects. It's not usually something that regional office staff say pick their favorite projects. It's how your project is actually written. Projects must meet the criteria as described in the annual SEC funding guidelines, and are expected to have a total project cost less than $500,000. Specifically Northeast, we also put a dollar threshold on our non-facilities, so anything under $100,000 is where we typically have a cutoff for non-facility projects. And the reason why we do that in the Northeast is we want to see more projects funded instead of maybe one large non-facility project take the whole pot, or one large facility project take the whole pot, because we're only allocated a certain dollar threshold each year. And then last, all regional 20% component funds are to be fully obligated within 12 months of allocation. This has to do with trying to clean up the amount of unobligated projects that are sitting out there. WASO budget has been putting this into our SEC guidance more and more and calling us out in the regional office. I believe last year alone, we had something like $60 million in this fund source nationwide that have been unobligated. So the projects that have been submitted, parks say that they're going to spend on them, and then no action happens. They just sit there. So the fund source is still no year, so projects can roll over, but the expectation from WASO budget is 12-month window once you get the funds. Then on to kind of the more complex, or probably the most complex fund source that we manage, is the nationwide 20%. So all parks, regions, and central offices are eligible to compete for nationwide 20% funding. Specifically with facility projects, they need to be projects that total project cost is $500,000 or more. And this is where the key is. They are nationally compelling. Specifically, nationally compelling projects directly improve the visitor experience associated with a core natural feature, historic building or landscape, iconic view or activity that is unique to that park, is a significant as a national symbol, and or is the reason why the park was established. With that, that needs to be directly called out in the project narratives. A lot of times, if it's not called out, that's where we will go back to you and work with you getting that included, but this is key. It's something usually that gets pulled for the Green Book entries as well. So we want to make sure that's clearly defined in your narratives once you do get this project picked up in this fund source. Then on non-facility projects, again, they have to be nationally compelling with a total project cost of $100,000 or more, and defined as visitor services or resource stewardship activities. Some of the examples you can see in this fund source are publications or brochures, production of park films, or education programs. For us in Northeast, this is where a lot of our park films go, especially for parks who do not have a park film, so any new films that need to be created, or educational programs such as junior ranger programs. And then last but not least is the public lands core 20% or PLC 20%. All parks, regions, and central offices are eligible to compete for the PLC 20% funding. The appropriate projects for this fund source are focused on facility and non-facility conservation, restoration, construction, or rehabilitation of natural, cultural, historic, archaeological, recreational, or scenic resources. So going back to what Mark was touching on with the slide that kind of gave us a cross-section of that road, no one mentioned it. PLC could almost touch everything on that slide except for maybe some of the parking lots, but PLC crews can definitely have a lot of help in parks and hiring youth crews. Other things about projects that would be appropriate for this fund source: the work is hands-on, any type of research work or public educational opportunities. And the big one is that they promote stewardship, citizenship, and life skills. The project requirements, so each component has a maximum dollar threshold of $75,000. That doesn't mean that you could have a project that has multiple components. That's perfectly fine. The project must engage youth, and the age range for that is ages 16 to 30, and then it goes up to 35 for veterans. And this is where it can get a little bit weird, but where your agreements office can help is that the project must show a 25% partner match. So most PLC projects are executed using an agreement with a qualified youth corps to satisfy this requirement. So hiring like an SCA youth crew to do trail work, that's where that partner match comes in. And your agreements folks would know how to specifically work with that. And then last, in the PMIS project, there's a few things that typically need to be highlighted. So one key one is in the project title and component title. You need to put in PLC. That helps with searching and filtering out those projects. Emphasis area, it's one of the options you can select in the edit project. You need to be able to select the youth work programs. This has to do with help setting up the WBS and correct funding information. And then the big one under editing the component, you need to include the number of planned youth employed and youth engaged. This is a big one for the youth programs reporting requirements. A couple of points I'd like to touch on just general project development that I've seen and over the couple of years in my position. Project cost estimates imported into PMIS must be net construction costs only. What that means is do not include compliance, design, project management, or contingency costs in the FMSS work orders. These types of costs must be entered as secondary add-ons in the appropriate component. This upcoming PMIS cycle, there are changes to PMIS and how these add-on costs will function correctly. So please pay attention to when that guidance document comes out, because it will change how we deal with these add-on costs and net construction costs. Cost estimates must reflect the remoteness of the project site, restrictions on construction season, and any special costs involved in mobilization, demobilization, and or the transportation of materials. So if we're using CES, a lot of that stuff is taken care of in the cost estimate, but if you use just a basic RS means and put in your own cost estimate using the FMSS work orders, make sure to include those remoteness factors as well. Then with non-facility projects, we see this a lot and we're trying to get this taken care of, but the use of lump sum costs is not acceptable for non-facility projects. Specifically with labor costs, we want to see them broken out by how many employees you want to hire, what their grade is, how many hours. Make sure to call out if there's any benefits that you want to include for the project. We want to see all that. We just don't want to see a lump 5 employees, $30,000. Each component estimate must also separately identify any contracts that are going to be issued, so it needs to be a separate line item. And then the big one, it's a little bit harder to do, but a lot of times just work with your regional staff. No lump sum for non-labor cost estimates. So for materials or services, we don't want to just see a lump, materials, $50,000. Well, if you're doing brushing or bridge work, things like that, break out some of that work. You don't need to have 50 line items in the project, but try and describe what the materials are that you're using, not just a general lump sum. And then kind of the last slide before we get to questions, just some general items. The project should be an interdisciplinary, comprehensive strategic plan where long-term goals are objective, quantified, and measurable. This goes back to what Mark was saying earlier. Data quality is critical. Accurate data adds to credibility to parks requests, improving your chance of obtaining adequate project funding. Quality control starts at the park level. Accurate data is key, and incomplete, poorly planned projects will be rejected. Give me an example of what I mean by that. Say you submit a project to Regional 20% to repair some historic fences at 3 different locations, and your narratives are written to that very well. I go check in FMSS, and you have plenty of work orders, but it's only to 1 location. That's where we're going to start running into issues. And that has to do with making sure that the correct funds are moving to the correct cost structure and tracking life cycle costs. So with that, make sure that your narratives support your work orders and vice versa. And I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions. Okay, if you guys have any questions, there's my contact info. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions, whether it's rec fee related or FMLP or anything like that, always available.
All right, thanks, Corey. And a couple of things about that. Corey is the rec fee program manager for Sea Otter Island, that region. training region. So we will be hearing from him again as we get close to AFMP, and you're going to be looking at doing rec fee projects for Sea Otter Island. He's been a great help with that. And also, I mean, a lot of the stuff that Corey just went over for rec fee, we're fortunate to have him available to us as an FMLP grad and as a collateral duty trainer. But you could also do a lot of the same things for other program funds too. So, you know, good quality data, no lump sums, things like that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Are all good pointers for no matter what fund source your project winds up in. There are some of those that are specific to rec fee, but a lot of them are just good tips for any project. So, all right. Again, thanks for that. So in the last few minutes that we have here, we want to sort of shift gears, not looking at the project, but start talking a little bit about identifying new projects, and then also looking at the projects we currently have to make sure they're in good shape and ready to go. So I'm going to share with you a couple of reports that you can get out of AMRS. And the first one is one I use a lot when I'm going to share the wrong screen. You should be seeing the right one. You see a spreadsheet right now? Hope, yeah, okay. I see Chad shaking his head, yes. This is the work order information report, and I use this quite a bit just to get ideas for new projects. So hopefully as you're working in the park, doing condition assessments, or just out there looking around, you are identifying work that needs to be done, work order gets created, and this is a great way to actually find new projects. And one of the ways to do this, after you run this in AMRS, is I will go over, get all of my work orders listed here, but then I can go to this PMIS column, and if it's not in a PMIS project, it will have 0 or blank as the PMIS number. Of course, it's not in a project. So I will just get rid of everything except 0 or blank. So that this should be all the work orders that are not in PMIS projects. I can move down through here and maybe find something. A lot of these may be operations work order, which we're not going to do, but here's one like grade to Lucanen Access Road. So evidently we need to do some grade work on Lucanen Access Road, so maybe that might be a good process. You can also see up here, there's another work order for the access road that says that this unpaved road needs to be rehabbed. So maybe those two come together, and maybe that makes up a good project. So I can review those work orders, see if it makes a good project, and then maybe start working to lump them together for the PST, and then send it PST to PMIS, and so on. So again, this is a great way to start identifying work that may go into a new project. Here's another one, Otterback Road, need to rehab the unpaved road. Maybe we can even lump that with Lucanen Access and create one for multiple unpaved roads. Spray dust palliative, you can see several things that start showing up. So that's one way to actually start identifying projects using the data that's already available to you. Any questions about that while I switch over to another report? All right. Where's my other? So the other one I want to share with you, this is a new report that we just created in AMRS. And just a little bit of background. AMRS includes business intelligence, which Carrie just showed you. So it's the same backbone basically to reporting. So we've started to create some new reporting using some of that business intelligence that helps lump things together, sort of like Carrie talked to you about, so we can analyze our data a little bit better. So this is a new report called the Asset Dashboard. This takes a look at asset records in FMSS, and asset records in FMSS are those components to our locations. So let's take a building, for example. The roof is an asset record. The climate system is an asset record. Doors, all that stuff could be an asset record in there. And as part of that asset record, you can also include the lifespan, when it would need replacing, and then also the cost for that replacement. So that's a lot of good information as you are planning for future projects to maybe handle some of that component renewal. This report takes all that and summarizes it for you. So right away we can see on the summary page right here. So at Sea Otter Island, we have 391 asset records, a total replacement cost, keep hitting my mouse button, of $5,421 and some change. Of that, 4.7 million is critical replacement. That means those assets, those components are actually critical to the long-term survival, basically, of that location. And then you can also see of that, 3.3 million is past due. And it breaks it down even further. So looking at API range. So within an API range of 90 to 100, those locations that are 90 to 100, we have actually $688,000 worth of component renewal that is past due. In 23 asset records, we have another $362,000 of that is critical components that need to be replaced, that are past due. And you see it goes even down the line. So API between 65 and 89, $2.4 million worth of replacement costs is now past due. So that sort of tells you a little bit of things that you have past due that may go well into a project. Looking further out, the next 5 years, if you wanted to create a 5-year plan for component renewal, $28,222 replacement cost is coming due in that 90 to 100 API range. Things like that. And then it goes on to all of them. So you can see that sort of summary right there. Then once you realize, okay, I need to take care of some of this replacement costs, and there's other different ways of looking at it, you can go down further in this report and it will start telling you some of that past due or 5-year out, those components that need to be looked at. So real quick, a good one to look at right here is, where was it? So take this. So this all this piping for the Lucanen Homestead water system, $33,700 worth of critical components is already 11 years past due. This is the one I've passed it up. On the South Island water system, the big one for the park, we have some pipe that is 29 years past due. It should have been replaced 29 years ago. That is $97,905. So just by looking at the data available in FMSS, you can already come up with some projects that you might need to create in order to handle some of this past due component renewal for Sea Otter Island or any park, and also things that might be coming up that are going to be coming past due. So it's a great tool to have available to you. Again, it requires good quality data, but once you get that good quality data in the system, you can then use that data to help analyze where you are as far as component renewal, some of that repair rehab work that needs to be done. Any questions about that? One other area we want to sort of highlight, we don't have any, I'll just talk a little bit about it before we show some of the projects that we already have. So we all know parametric assessments are coming, and as you are doing those parametric assessments, or as you've done them, you are identifying components to a location that may need some work to them. So let's say the Sea Otter Island Visitor Center, you do a parametric on that and you mark the roof as down as in being in bad shape. That already, there is a way to identify a new project that may need to go into the system. Not only are you helping to set your parametric, but you're also identifying projects. So anytime you are dealing directly with your locations, your assets, and you identify work, make sure you document it. That way you can take care of it possibly later on through a project. Any questions about that? And the last thing I want to show you, and this is going to be part of your homework this month, so you may want to pay attention, is to review your projects on a regular basis. Carrie did a great job of showing you how to schedule reports. I didn't have that option when I was at the park, so it's great now that we have that option. But what I would do is, you know, every so often, at least once a month, run reports out of PMIS, dump them into a spreadsheet, and then use the Excel to help me identify work that they need to work on. So this one is one that we've created for Sea Otter Island. You can see right here, this is a list of all of our projects currently, all of our facilities projects currently in PMIS, in the works for getting funded. You can see some of them, like the rehab of the superintendent's house. Superintendent Walter made sure that that one got funded this year. So you can see there it's in funded shape. Got some others. This one is a very important one for us, rehabilitate causeway breakwater, because the causeway onto the island is failing in a lot of places. This one is formulated for 2025. That in place now with the idea that we may be getting some additional money coming up available to us. We may want to go in and make sure that this project is well written, ready to go in case we can move that up from 2025 to say 2021, or even, well, yeah, 2021, 2022. So looking at information that way is very important. The other thing this spreadsheet will do is allows you to, it will do a little bit of analysis on its own through some automation. So like here, the cyclic maintenance of the Shoal Trail, it can already tell you that there's no work orders in place for that. So you may need to go, if you really want to do this, you need to clean up your work orders. You need to make sure your cost estimates are complete, things like that. Over here on the replace the lagoon island, the project is not prioritized, so you need to make sure and look at that. Different things like that. It also allows you as a park staff to go in and say, okay, we're going to take care of this one with day labor or contract it, so we may need to get assistance from contracting for this project. If it's going to require Pepsi, you can do that. So no, this has not even started. We need to start working on things like that. So by combining data sources, and in this case, we're taking that PMIS project and component data report that Carrie showed you. That one, you can get a lot of fields brought in. I brought in several different fields, combining that with some work order information, then letting Excel do its thing. You can help identify and review projects that need work. So again, it's very important, especially in this day when projects are going to be high on our priority list for the next couple of years, probably, that you keep track of where your projects are in status-wise, all the components to make sure they're ready to go. Corey used that term, we use it a lot, shovel ready. Make sure your projects are shovel ready, because who knows when they're going to get funded nowadays. You may say something needs to be funded in 2025, and you may get that moved up quickly. So just be ready, make sure your project's ready to go. Any questions about that? And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get ready for homework. All right. So, meeting controls. I can't. My meeting controls will not come up. Nona, can you stop my share or something? I can't. I don't know where.
I am not sure if I can.
Okay, I'll just do it this way. Let me see if I can. We'll just go through this. I think you should be able to, you're seeing now PowerPoint with best practices. Well, I just got off of that. Hopefully you can see that. We'll just share it this way. I don't know where my meeting controls are. In the last few moments here, we want to talk a little bit. There we go. Thank you. That was you, Nona.
I did it for you, Mark.
Thanks, Corey. We all got our backs here. Let me pull up best practices and share that with you. So last few moments here, we want to talk a little bit about best practices going forward. When you're creating projects, when you're reviewing projects. So we said this at the beginning, we've said it again. We've always talked about not writing your project to a fund source, but it's especially true now. We want to write our project so we let the fund find you. We want to make sure that it's well written so that if it's available to another fund source, it's there. A well-written project should open the door to multiple fund sources. Yes, there are going to be some requirements, like Corey said, if it's a PLC project, you have to mention that. But generally, you know it's going to be a PLC project as you start writing it, because you have already found that partner to help you with it. But for the most part, as you're beginning to write the project, writing the narratives and all that stuff, make sure you write it well, make sure you include as many details as necessary so that multiple fund sources can apply to that project. Requested funding year should be the actual requested funding FY. This gets confusing sometimes. People say, well, I'll request it a couple of years ahead of time just to make sure I get it in that FY. That sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I had a project that I requested a couple of years ahead of when we really needed, and it got funded at that time, and we weren't ready for it. Again, we want to write these projects, we want to plan for projects so that we get the right amount of money at the right place at the right time. So the requested funding year should be the year that you need it. Doesn't always work that way, but always write the project with the requested funding year for that. When you're writing the projects, keep in mind that you need to manage that project. One thing I've talked to several folks, Corey about, Josh Gilshakis about the last couple of, as some of these huge projects get pulled out to go to GOA, that's going to leave vacuum money, especially in rec fee. And so you know, parks will not have the ability to manage that much money. So remember that you may need to have a plan in place for managing the project if you're requesting it. Don't get the money and realize there's no way you can manage that project. So if you need to talk to region to see if they can help you with that, definitely help that. If it's, you know, a huge project, DSC needs to get involved. Make sure you do that. But always have a plan for how you're going to manage that project when it gets funded. Corey mentioned this. It's good for everything beyond Rec Fee 2. A single lump sum cost estimate is not acceptable. If you do assess estimate in your work orders, it will take care of that for you. But make sure you do not lump everything together and say this is going to have, this is how much it's going to cost. Your labor, materials, supplies, contracted services, all that must be identified in the project. Ensure your PMIS project and project funding component data is complete and reflects best practices. Again, make sure they're all well written and all the fields are populated with the best data available. And finally, data quality is always a part of this. Make sure your data is up to date. Clean up old data as you're going forward. If conditions change, make sure you change your funding components, things like that, to make sure that what's in PMIS, what's in FMSS is the best data available. So any questions or comments about that, or anything about identifying projects and getting them reviewed and ready?
Hey, Mark, I have one thing that can be added. So if you have a project that, let's say it's very complex and multi-million-dollar project and you've done all your estimating in SES, it doesn't hurt to export that SES estimate and attach it to the project. It helps solidify your cost estimates even more because not everyone has access to SES to figure out exactly where you got your estimates from.
Right. That's a good point. And if you need help exporting that project out of SES, let us know. Those of you who are been able to take the SES basic class, we talk about that, but we can find help for you too to make sure you get that project out of SES. SES is an industry standard cost estimating program, so it's a great tool to have at our fingertips and also a way of getting data out. So thanks for that, Corey. Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
I have a question about work order numbers.
Okay.
And to the projects. And I'm trying to figure out an example for this. So I have custodial staff that cleans a campground. So should there be a different operational number for cleaning the vault toilets, cleaning the fire rings, picking up trash? Or should that all be one number?
So that's really at the park's discretion. It's how much granularity that you have. So when it comes to operations, when using your ONPS money, most of that is going to be at the park's discretion. Do you want to know how much time they're spending on each vault toilet, things like that? It's when you get into the point that you're ready to put this into a project that you need to have the granularity in the work orders. So it's at least by location. So you know, you don't lump everything into a Yellowstone work order to say I'm going to replace all the vault toilets. You need to have separate work orders for each vault toilet you're going to replace, let's say. So for operations and maintenance for your ONPS money, most of that is going to be at the park's discretion. How much granularity do you want to get out of the system? When it gets to projects, it's a little, you need to have a little bit more detail in the work orders that you enter that get sent over through PST to PMIS.
So if I'm, like you say, if I'm going to try to go after money for vault toilets, each vault toilet should have a work order against for painting or.
Right. So if you're going after cyclic money for vault toilets, let's say you would need to have a work order for each one of those locations, each one of those vault toilets.
Okay.
So that way we can identify where the project money is going.
Okay.
Is that fair to say, Corey?
Yeah, the big requirement under the law for reporting is that we have to report to the location level. So sometimes this gets really tricky, especially with systems. So and it all depends on which park you're at. So sometimes when the park inventoried their portfolio, they lumped or split things. So you just have to pay attention to how things are written and always default back to that location. The one I can think of is if, let's say on a water line, you're replacing backflow preventers, or on a wastewater system, better, backflow preventers. Well, we don't need a work order for each backflow preventer. You might have 50 of them. We only need the one that's the location. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. So there's our objectives. I think we met them all. We're running out of time, so I'll just say we met them all. Homework, everything. So the good news is, unlike previous years, you do not have a spreadsheet to fill out. You can say thank you later. But I've filled it out because things are changing so fast. We didn't feel like it was a good exercise to have you deal with that. So that spreadsheet that I just showed you is on the virtual classroom. What we want you to do is download it and review it. We know you have limited information there, but what we want you to do is look through that, find 5 of those projects that you feel are top priorities for the park. If you need to talk to some of the park management team, reach out to us. You can get on with Ops Time with me to find out where we think some of the priorities are. I know like Sandy is concerned. Is Sandy still on? No, I think she had to get off. Sandy's still concerned about Rocky Point coming online, so maybe projects there are important. Christy's worried about Lucan and Homestead coming online, so things like that. But find there that you think are the top priorities of the park. Using just that limited data that's on that spreadsheet, do you think they appear to be shovel ready? And if so, why? If not, why not? And then find 5 projects from the out years. So those things that may be like 2024 on out that might be candidates for moving up. And what might need to be done to get them shovel ready. So this is just reviewing the data that we're giving you. And again, I know it's limited, but you need to start thinking about what is the priorities that need to be shovel ready to go in case we get money. And then some of those things that we may be able to move up. So that's the first part of it. The second part is that asset dashboard that I showed you just now is also available to you in the virtual classroom. So go ahead and look at that. Find 2 potential projects. Please don't use the water lines that I just showed you. Be a little bit more creative than that. But find 2 potential projects for FMS that are in FMSS and give us a little bit about why you think they should be in as projects. So a little bit simpler. You don't have to deal with cutting and pasting in the spreadsheets. So you get a little bit of a month off here now. So definitely look at that. It will be due September 27th, Sunday, September 27th. That's the birthday gift for me. That's my birthday. So I'll start grading them then. So thanks for that. If you do have any questions, I'm going to have a couple of sessions of Ops Time with Marketea the next 2 Thursdays before they're due at 1 o'clock. So you can definitely join me on Microsoft Teams. Again, if you want to just pick my brain to see what some of those priorities might be, that's a great way to go also. And then any other questions you might have. So 17th and the 24th at 1 o'clock. With that, we're done. Do you have any other questions or anything? We're a little bit late again, so thanks for hanging in, but hopefully you found it useful. Any other questions? Hey, Corey, I just saw your question in the chat about the asset dashboard. I think it's available in the training folder now.
Got it. I didn't see it under the asset
We haven't
folder.
moved it into production yet. I think you still have access. You still have access to the training folder. You should.
Yeah, I do.
So yeah, we didn't move it into production yet because we felt that folks needed to have a little bit of idea what to use it for before we did put it in production.
Yeah, I think it'll be a great tool for us. Thank you.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week, rest of the week, and we'll be talking to you shortly.